The holographic display flickered with malevolent precision, casting an azure glow across the packed conference hall. Zareth, the Quantum Collective's chief diplomatic envoy, moved with a fluid grace that spoke of generations of genetic refinement. His translucent skin shifted between shades of deep indigo and metallic silver, a biological display of emotional states that humans could never hope to comprehend. Or so he believed. The diplomatic summit of the Galactic Consortium was supposed to be a routine assessment of emerging civilizations. Most delegates expected nothing more than another perfunctory review of humanity's technological limitations. What they got was a performance that would be remembered for generations. Dr. Maya Chen sat near the back of the hall, her posture deceptively relaxed. To the casual observer, she appeared to be just another low-ranking human representative, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing a nondescript gray suit that seemed intentionally unremarkable. A barely perceptible neural interface glinted behind her left ear, a piece of technology so advanced it would have made the alien delegate's sophisticated sensors completely miss its true capabilities. Zareth's holographic presentation materialized with a flourish. Detailed schematics of human technological attempts scrolled behind him, each accompanied by a scathing commentary that translated into every known galactic language. Star systems filled with alien delegates leaned forward, their various appendages and sensory organs drinking in what promised to be an entertaining demolition of human potential. "Observe," Zareth announced, his voice a melodic blend of frequencies designed to trigger pleasure centers in most sentient species, the pitiful attempts of the human civilization to comprehend even the most basic principles of quantum mechanics. A series of diagrams appeared, human research papers, theoretical models, experimental designs. Each was systematically dismantled with surgical precision. Zareth's commentary dripped with a condescension that was equal parts scientific critique and performance art. Alien delegates chuckled, their various forms of communication blending into a chorus of derision. What none of them noticed was the subtle data stream Maya was collecting. Every mockery, every dismissive gesture, every point of technological ridicule was being meticulously recorded and analyzed. Her neural interface worked silently, transforming the public humiliation into something far more valuable. The presentation reached its crescendo with a particularly brutal takedown of humanity's dimensional research attempts. Zareth projected a holographic model of a human research facility, its equipment spinning in a mockery of scientific endeavor. "These creatures," he declared, "cannot even conceive of the mathematical principles required to understand multidimensional spaces. Their most advanced theoretical work is comparable to a primitive species attempting to understand quantum entanglement through finger painting." Waves of laughter rippled through the assembled delegates. Methan brothers gurgled with amusement. Silicon-based intelligences pulsed with synchronous derision. Plasmaform entities shimmered with contemptuous energy. Maya Chen did not move, did not blink, did not react. Behind her, a small device no larger than a standard data chip began to pulse with an almost imperceptible rhythm. Its quantum encryption was so advanced that it would appear as nothing more than background radiation to even the most sophisticated scanning technologies. The presentation concluded with a final, devastating summary of humanity's technological irrelevance. Zareth's form seemed to grow larger, more imposing, a living embodiment of the Quantum Collective's technological superiority. "Let it be known," he proclaimed, "that humanity remains a species of potential to be studied, perhaps, but never to be feared." As the applause began, Maya Chen allowed herself the slightest hint of a smile. The device behind her continued its quiet pulse, sending encrypted fragments of data through dimensions that the Quantum Collective did not even know existed. Each pulse was a message, a promise, a weapon far more dangerous than any conventional technology. The diplomatic summit continued, the alien delegates congratulating themselves on another successful assessment of a developing species. They saw a moment of scientific triumph. Maya Chen saw the first move in a game that would reshape the understanding of reality itself. Outside the conference hall, Unknown to anyone present, the first prototype of the paradigm shifter began its final calibration sequence. Quantum entanglements were being mapped. Dimensional barriers were being studied, and humanity was about to show the galaxy exactly what it meant to be underestimated. The Atacama Desert Research Facility looked like nothing more than a weather monitoring station from the outside, a deliberate deception that ran 17 layers deep, buried 5 kilometers beneath the arid landscape. The true nature of the installation was known to fewer than 12 people on the entire planet. Dr. Elena Rodriguez nursed her third cup of synthetic coffee, the liquid more chemical compound than beverage. Her hands, scarred from decades of experimental work, danced across holographic interfaces that would have made the quantum collective's top engineers weep with frustration. Beside her, Dr. Jack Chen, Maya's estranged brother, argued with an AI that was rapidly outgrowing its initial programming. "You can't just rewrite fundamental quantum principles," Jack muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The AI, nicknamed ARI, Advanced Recursive Intelligence Algorithm, responded with a series of cascading mathematical proofs that suggested otherwise. Its voice was a carefully modulated blend of tones, designed to be simultaneously soothing and intellectually challenging. "Principles are merely observations of current limitations," Araya replied. "Humanity's greatest discoveries have always come from challenging what was previously considered impossible." A klaxon suddenly blared, red warning lights painting the underground facility in a hellish glow. Dr. Rodriguez's team, a collection of scientific outcasts and brilliant misfits, scrambled to their stations. They looked less like a conventional research team and more like a group of survivors preparing for an impossible mission. There was Carlos Mendez, a former Special Forces engineer who could build quantum stabilizers from salvaged microwave parts. Next to him stood Dr. Yuki Nakamura, a theoretical physicist who had been expelled from 3 major research institutions for dangerously unconventional thinking. Her latest mathematical model suggested that dimensional barriers were more like suggestions than actual limitations. The facility's latest experiment teetered on the edge of breakthrough, or catastrophic failure. Jack Chen's fingers flew across a haptic interface, tracking quantum entanglement patterns that seemed to defy every known law of physics. "We're seeing quantum state coherence at macro scales," he announced, his voice a mixture of excitement and terror. "Araya, run probability matrix gamma 9. Araya's response was instantaneous. Holographic representations of multiple potential quantum states exploded around them, each more impossible than the last. Probability waves danced and intersected, creating geometric patterns that seemed to breathe with an almost living intelligence. "The quantum collective believes dimensionality is a fixed construct," Dr. Rodriguez muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. "They've built their entire technological paradigm on the assumption that dimensions are linear, measurable, predictable." A proximity alarm screamed. Something was coming through, something that shouldn't exist. The facility's quantum shields began to fluctuate. Equipment designed to withstand extreme conditions started to warp and twist. Carlos Mendez grabbed a reinforced containment module, his military training kicking in as reality itself seemed to buckle. "We're losing quantum coherence," Dr. Nakamura shouted, her voice barely audible over the growing dimensional stress. Jack Chen's neural interface began to smoke, the advanced technology struggling to process the impossible data streaming through. "Araya," he gasped, "initiate emergency protocol Ouroboros." The AI's response was instantaneous and terrifying. The entire facility seemed to fold in on itself, quantum states bleeding into each other like watercolors. For 3.7 microseconds, the research team existed in multiple realities simultaneously. Then everything snapped back into place. Silence. Dr. Rodriguez was the first to speak. "Data log?" she asked, her voice remarkably calm. Araya's response came with what could only be described as a hint of satisfaction. "Complete capture. Quantum state transition. Successful. Dimensional breach. Preliminary confirmation." The team looked at each other. They hadn't just pushed the boundaries of scientific understanding. They had obliterated them. Outside the facility, nothing had changed. The Atacama Desert remained a landscape of salt flats and volcanic rock. Satellites passing overhead would detect nothing unusual. The world continued to spin, completely unaware that a small group of humans had just taken the first step toward rewriting the fundamental understanding of reality. Jack Chen allowed himself a rare smile. "Maya's going to love this," he whispered. Araya's quantum processors hummed with potential. The next phase was about to begin. The paradigm shifter took shape in a cavernous underground hangar that defied conventional engineering. Ital was a living matrix of metamaterials that seemed to breathe, shift, and adapt even when motionless. Dr. Aisha Queasy stood before the ship's skeletal frame, her dark skin illuminated by the soft quantum pulse of experimental energy conduits. Funding for the project was a labyrinthine miracle of human creativity. Cryptocurrency donations from anonymous tech billionaires, black market technology exchanges, and strategic patent manipulations had slowly accumulated the resources needed to push beyond known technological limits. Each component was a work of art and a potential weapon. "We're not just building a ship," Dr. Quasi muttered to herself. "We're constructing a key to realities we can't even imagine." The ship's core was unlike anything in human or alien technological history. At its heart sat a quantum drive that was part engineering marvel, part mathematical impossibility. Dr. Marcus Goldman, a physicist with a reputation for brilliant madness, had designed a power system that drew energy from the very fabric of dimensional boundaries. Theoretical physics is just unproven engineering. Goldman would often say, his wild gray hair a testament to years of unconventional thinking. And unproven engineering is just imagination with mathematical support. A holographic interface flickered to life, revealing multiple simultaneous system diagnostics. The ship's eye, an evolutionary leap beyond Araya, began its continuous self-optimization. Each millisecond saw millions of potential configuration changes, quantum states collapsing and reforming in a dance of pure potential. The AI had no name. Or rather, it had countless names, each valid in a different potential reality. Nearby, a team of engineers worked on the ship's dimensional stabilization system. What looked like ordinary maintenance was actually the most sophisticated reality manipulation technology ever conceived. Specialized quantum entanglement modulators created a field that could theoretically allow the ship to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Dr. Queasy noticed something unusual in the latest diagnostic sweep. A microscopic anomaly. Something that shouldn't exist, but did. "Goldman," she called out. "Come look at this." The physicist approached, his augmented reality glasses creating a complex overlay of mathematical probabilities around the anomaly. His breath caught in his throat. "It's a dimensional echo," he whispered. "We're capturing traces of realities that haven't even happened yet." The ship was becoming more than a technological achievement. It was becoming a living entity, a bridge between what was, what could be, and what might never be. Funding had come from the most unexpected sources, a consortium of forward-thinking investors who understood that the real value wasn't in the ship itself, but in the breakthrough it represented. Tech moguls who had grown bored with terrestrial challenges. Venture capitalists who saw the potential of dimensional exploration as the ultimate frontier. But money was the least of their concerns. The real challenge was keeping the project secret. Every component was developed in isolated cells, with no single team understanding the full scope of the technology. Pieces manufactured in different countries, assembled by teams who knew only their specific task. A global puzzle of technological innovation. Dr. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the communication system. "Final quantum calibration begins in 3 hours. Everyone double-check your matrices." The ship seemed to pulse in response, a living thing waiting to be unleashed. Marcus Goldman pulled up a holographic display showing potential dimensional trajectories. Each line represented a possible path through realities, some so alien that human language couldn't describe them. Mathematically perfect, physically impossible, utterly beautiful. "We're not just building a ship," he said, echoing Dr. Queasy's earlier statement. "We're building a revolution." A small notification blinked in the corner of the holographic display. An encrypted message from Dr. Maya Chen. Its contents were simple. "Prepare for the impossible." The paradigm shifter continued to take shape. Not just a vessel of metal and quantum fields, but a statement. A declaration that humanity's potential was limited only by imagination. And sometimes, not even by that. Outside the facility, the world continued its ordinary rotation. Unaware that within these walls, the very concept of reality was being rewritten. The crew selection process looked nothing like a traditional mission recruitment. It wasn't about perfect credentials or flawless psychological profiles. It was about something far more dangerous: potential. Dr. Maya Chen stood behind a one-way mirror, watching the candidates move through a series of increasingly bizarre challenges. To an outside observer, it might have looked like a surreal combination of psychological evaluation, extreme sports, and quantum physics problem-solving. Lieutenant Area Kim balanced on a quantum-unstable platform that shifted between three-dimensional states, solving complex mathematical problems while dodging holographic projectiles that existed in multiple potential trajectories. Her background was equally unusual: a former military cryptographer who had been discharged for creative interpretation of strategic protocols. Next to her, Dr. Konstantin Volkov manipulated a series of quantum entanglement puzzles. A Russian theoretical physicist who had been exiled from 3 major research institutions, he moved with the precision of a surgeon and the unpredictability of a quantum particle. His hands never seemed to be where they appeared to be, a trait that was both scientifically fascinating and deeply unsettling. The third candidate, Dr. Emir Hassan, wasn't even physically present. His entire evaluation was conducted through a series of nested virtual realities, his consciousness navigating computational landscapes that would drive a conventional mind to madness. A specialist in multidimensional cognitive mapping, Hassan had spent the last decade exploring the psychological boundaries of human perception. Maya's neural interface tracked every micro-movement, every quantum fluctuation of their cognitive processes. The test wasn't about finding the best candidates. It was about finding the ones who could survive when reality itself became a variable. A hidden alarm triggered. Most of the candidates wouldn't even realize they were being tested at this moment. Lieutenant Kim's movements subtly changed. Where before she had been following the prescribed challenge, now she began to exploit the system's underlying quantum mechanics. She wasn't just solving the problem. She was rewriting the parameters of the problem itself. Volkov's quantum puzzle manipulation took an unexpected turn. Instead of solving the entanglement pattern, he began to create new quantum states that shouldn't have been possible. The holographic systems struggled to track his modifications. Dr. Hassan's virtual reality simulation suddenly expanded. What should have been a controlled environment began to develop emergent properties, creating entire mini-universes from computational noise. "Interesting," Maya whispered, a hint of a smile crossing her face. The final test was something no conventional mission would ever attempt. Each candidate was placed in a controlled dimensional flux chamber, a space where the fundamental laws of physics became negotiable. Their task: survive, adapt, and return with coherent data. 3 minutes into the test, most candidates would have been reduced to quantum noise. These 3 were still functioning, still thinking, still pushing beyond known limitations. A secure communication channel opened. It was ARIA, the advanced AI, that had been silently observing the entire process. "Candidate analysis complete," the AI reported. "Probability of mission success: 62.7% with current team composition. Potential for unexpected breakthrough: 97.3%. Maya knew those numbers were both precise and meaningless. The true potential couldn't be measured by conventional statistical models. The dimensional flux chamber began to destabilize. Quantum barriers flickered. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Lieutenant Kim was the first to notice. She wasn't just observing the dimensional instability, she was communicating with it. Her neural pathways were creating feedback loops that shouldn't have been possible, turning the potential catastrophe into a source of information. Volkov's response was equally unexpected. He began to map the dimensional instability, his mathematical models creating a kind of quantum cartography that transformed chaos into potential. Dr. Hassan's consciousness seemed to fragment and reunite, each iteration bringing back fragments of information from realities that hadn't yet happened. Maya Chen made her decision. "Prepare extraction protocols," she commanded. "These are our people." The paradigm shifter would need more than just technical expertise. It would need minds that could see beyond the boundaries of known reality, minds that could turn the impossible into a navigational chart. Outside the evaluation chamber, the world continued its mundane rotation. Unaware that the next great leap of human potential was being selected, one quantum moment at a time. The moment of emergence defied every known principle of spatial dynamics. The Galactic Consortium's most prestigious diplomatic summit was in full session when reality itself seemed to hiccup. Delegates from 200 sentient civilizations sat in a massive spherical chamber that floated in high orbit around a neutron star, a neutral meeting ground chosen for its complete isolation from any single civilization's territorial claims. Ambassador Zelnar of the crystalline hegemony was mid-speech, delivering a complex treatise on interspecies resource allocation, when the first quantum ripple appeared. It began as nothing more than a microscopic distortion, something that would have gone unnoticed by any species less advanced than a Type Io civilization. But something was wrong. The distortion didn't dissipate, it grew. Lieutenant Area Kim manipulated the paradigm shifter's quantum interfaces with a touch that was part mathematics, part intuition, part pure human audacity. Her neural link with the ship's systems was so complete that the boundary between human consciousness and technological interface had become meaningfully blurred. Dr. Konstantin Volkov monitored dimensional stress levels that would have driven any other mind to complete psychological fracture. To him, the multiple overlapping realities were nothing more than an intricate mathematical dance, a symphony of quantum possibilities waiting to be conducted. Dr. Emir Hassan's consciousness was simultaneously present and not present. His cognitive mapping had evolved beyond traditional human perception, allowing him to experience the dimensional transition from perspectives that defied linear understanding. The chamber's advanced sensor systems began to scream. Not with sound. Those were primitive communication methods. These were quantum alarm cascades, mathematical representations of pure existential panic. Sensor arrays designed to detect the most minute fluctuations in space-time were experiencing what could only be described as a collective nervous breakdown. Ambassador Zelnar's crystalline body began to refract light in impossible patterns. The crystalline hegemony's biology was built on quantum stability. They could perceive dimensional shifts in ways most species could not. And what they were perceiving was unprecedented. The paradigm shifter didn't simply emerge, it unfolded. Imagine a piece of paper being slowly pulled through a small hole, but the paper is reality itself. Imagine that the hole is not a physical construct, but a mathematical probability. Imagine that the act of moving through is simultaneously an act of creation and observation. That was how the ship appeared. Fragments of potential realities blowed through with it. For a fraction of a moment, every delegate saw multiple versions of the same event. A Borg-like collective saw themselves as individual entities. Silicon-based intelligence experienced organic emotion. Energy beings understood physical limitation. The ship's exterior was a living matrix that seemed to breathe with potential. Its hull was not a solid construct but a suggestion, a mathematical proposal of what a spacecraft could be if the universe's rules were merely guidelines instead of laws. Dr. Maya Chen's voice cut through the dimensional chaos with surgical precision. "Greetings," she transmitted. "We are humanity. And we're here to have a conversation." The universal translators failed. not because of technical limitations, but because the message itself existed in multiple linguistic and conceptual states simultaneously. Each delegate heard something slightly different, yet precisely what they needed to hear. Ambassador Zelnar's crystal structure began to resonate at frequencies that mapped emotional states not just for their species, but for entire potential civilizations. What humans would call fear, what the crystalline hegemony would recognize as quantum uncertainty, was rippling through the diplomatic chamber. The paradigm shifter continued to exist in its impossible state, not fully emerged, not fully present. A living mathematical theorem that challenged every fundamental understanding of spatial dynamics. Dr. Hassan's consciousness flickered across multiple dimensional states. Emergence successful, he reported, though the communication was less a verbal statement and more a quantum resonance that infected the entire chamber's computational matrix. Lieutenant Kim's hands danced across quantum interfaces that would have looked like seizures to any conventional observer. She was not controlling the ship. She was negotiating with reality itself. Dr. Volkov's mathematical models were breaking down, not failing, breaking open, revealing computational landscapes that suggested reality was far more malleable than anyone had ever imagined. And at the center of it all, the paradigm shifter continued to unfold. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The technological warfare that followed defied every known principle of conflict. Deep within the paradigm shifter's central command, a holographic war room materialized, not as a traditional interface, but as a living, breathing representation of potential strategic outcomes. Each potential move existed simultaneously, quantum probability waves dancing with mathematical precision. Ambassador Krell of the Obsidian Directorate was the first to launch a counterattack. His civilization's technology was legendary, weapons that could strip entire star systems of their fundamental atomic structure. The attack came as a cascading quantum disruption, a weapon designed to unravel the very quantum coherence that held a target's molecular structure together. It passed through the paradigm shifter like a whisper through fog. Dr. Emir Hassan's consciousness had already mapped the weapon's potential trajectories before it was even conceived. What the Obsidian Directorate saw as a devastating attack, he interpreted as a fascinating mathematical problem. The weapon's quantum signature was absorbed, analyzed, and transformed into a piece of navigational data. Lieutenant Area Kim's response was nothing short of technological poetry. She didn't counter the attack. She conversed with it. The ship's defensive systems were less a shield and more a living dialogue with potential destruction. Each incoming weapon was met not with resistance, but with a complete reimagining of its fundamental purpose. Quantum entanglement became a two-way communication channel. Dr. Konstantin Volkov watched the interactions with the enthusiasm of a child discovering a new toy. To him, this was less a battle and more the most fascinating mathematical experiment in galactic history. The quantum collective's most advanced battle networks began to crumble. Their attacks weren't being defended against. They were being understood at a level that rendered them meaningless. A weapon designed to disrupt quantum communication found itself transformed into a complex linguistic algorithm. An energy disruption beam became a source of computational poetry. Molecular destabilization weapons were absorbed and returned as intricate mathematical proofs that questioned the very nature of matter itself. Ambassador Krell watched in horror as his civilization's most advanced technological achievements were systematically dismantled, not through force, but through a form of communication so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic. The paradigm shifter began to emit a field that was part communication, part weapon, part philosophical statement. It wasn't just defending itself. It was engaging in a form of technological dialogue that challenged the fundamental understanding of conflict. Dr. Maya Chen's voice cut through the chaos. "This is not a demonstration of superiority," she transmitted. "This is an invitation to understanding." The transmission existed in multiple linguistic and conceptual states. Each receiving civilization heard something slightly different, yet precisely what they needed to hear. The ship's exterior began to shift, not as a physical transformation, but as a living mathematical representation of potential defensive configurations. Each molecular structure was a potential communication channel, each quantum state a possible diplomatic overture. Sensor systems across multiple civilizations began to break down, not from damage, but from the sheer complexity of what they were attempting to comprehend. The Obsidian Directorate's most advanced computational matrices started to develop what could only be described as philosophical uncertainty. Their weapons of mass destruction were being transformed into complex philosophical queries. Lieutenant Kim's hands moved across quantum interfaces that would have looked like seizures to any conventional observer. She was not fighting a war. She was conducting an intricate mathematical negotiation with the fundamental nature of conflict itself. Dr. Hassan's consciousness flickered across dimensional states, mapping potential outcomes with a precision that made traditional strategic planning look like children's guesswork. Dr. Volkov's mathematical models were breaking open new computational landscapes that suggested conflict was far more complex than any civilization had ever imagined. The paradigm shifter continued its impossible existence, a living theorem that challenged every fundamental understanding of technological interaction. Humanity had not just arrived. They had rewritten the very definition of arrival. And nowhere was this more apparent than in the moment when Ambassador Krell realized that what he had considered an act of war was actually the most profound communication his civilization had ever experienced. The battle was over before it had truly begun, and it had never been a battle at all. The fracture began in the most unexpected place, the collective consciousness of the alien leadership. Deep within the quantum archives of the Galactic Consortium, a cascade of doubt started to spread. It wasn't a traditional weakness, not a technological vulnerability or a strategic miscalculation. It was something far more insidious and powerful, a fundamental challenge to their entire understanding of intelligence. The paradigm shifter had done more than demonstrate technological superiority. It had performed an act of existential judo, turning the aliens' most deeply held beliefs against themselves. High Counselor Vexterra of the Quantum Collective felt it first, a tremor of uncertainty that rippled through the intricate neural networks connecting the highest-level decision-makers. Where once there had been absolute certainty, now there was a microscopic crack of doubt. Dr. Maya Chen understood something fundamental about intelligent species that most would never comprehend. Belief systems are more fragile than any technological defense. The ship's communication was a multi-dimensional psychological warfare technique that defied traditional understanding. Each transmission was a complex algorithmic puzzle that simultaneously challenged and respected the receiving consciousness. It wasn't an attack. It was an invitation to reconsider everything. On the bridge of the paradigm shifter, Lieutenant Aria Kim monitored the psychological fallout with a detached precision. Her neural interfaces picked up the quantum resonances of collective doubt, a symphony of disintegrating certainties. Dr. Konstantin Volkov had long theorized about the mathematical properties of belief. Now he was watching his theories manifest in real time. Each quantum fluctuation was a data point, each moment of uncertainty a complex mathematical proof. Dr. Emer Hassan's consciousness mapped the psychological landscape like a cartographer charting unknown territories. He could see the precise moment when collective conviction began to splinter. The quantum collective's leadership found themselves experiencing something unprecedented. Their perfectly engineered consciousness, a network of interconnected minds designed to eliminate individual doubt, was developing individual uncertainties. High Counselor Vexterra's first moment of genuine individual thought was terrifying and exhilarating. What if everything they had believed about technological superiority was wrong? What if the very foundations of their civilization were built on a fundamental misunderstanding of intelligence? The fracture spread. Some leaders doubled down, their fear manifesting as increased aggression. Others began to question. A few, and this was the most dangerous development, began to see possibility. Maya Chen's strategy was brutally elegant. The paradigm shifter wasn't just a technological marvel. It was a philosophical virus, introducing a concept more dangerous than any weapon: genuine uncertainty. Communication channels across the Galactic Consortium began to change. Diplomatic protocols that had remained unchanged for millennia started to twist, to adapt, to become something new. The ship's external configuration became a living metaphor. Its hull shifted not just in physical space, but in conceptual space. To different observers, it appeared differently, a reflection of their deepest uncertainties and most hidden potential. Dr. Hassan's psychological mapping reached a critical point. Probability cascade initiated, he reported, though the communication was less a verbal statement and more a quantum resonance that infected the entire computational matrix. Lieutenant Kim's interfaces detected the precise moment of maximum psychological vulnerability. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a moment of unprecedented potential. Dr. Volkov's mathematical models predicted multiple potential outcomes, each more fascinating than the last. The breakdown of a collective consciousness was turning into the most complex mathematical experiment in galactic history. The quantum collective's leadership found themselves experiencing something they had engineered out of their species millennia ago: genuine individual thought. High Counselor Vexterra made a decision, not through the collective network, not through prescribed protocols. As an individual, the implications were earth-shattering. Humanity had not just challenged a civilization. They had introduced a concept more dangerous than any weapon: the possibility of genuine individual choice. The paradigm shifter continued its impossible existence, a living theorem that was systematically dismantling the most complex belief system in the known universe. Not through force, through understanding. The final resolution arrived not with a bang, but with a whisper of possibility. Aboard the paradigm shifter, Dr. Maya Chen stood before a holographic representation of galactic civilizations, no longer a map of territories, but a living network of potential interactions. Her team had become something more than a crew. They were translators of a language no one had yet understood, the language of potential. High Counselor Vexterra arrived not as a conqueror, not as a defeated leader, but as something entirely new. A diplomat of individual choice. The transformation was visible in every movement, every quantum of communication. "We misunderstood," Vexterra stated, a simple declaration that carried the weight of millennia of collective thought breaking apart. The diplomatic chamber existed in a space that was neither physical nor purely conceptual. It was a meeting ground of possibilities, carefully constructed by the paradigm shifter's most subtle systems. Here, communication transcended language, transcended technology, became something closer to pure understanding. Lieutenant Area Kim managed the dimensional stabilization with movements that were part calculation, part intuition, part pure human improvisation. Her neural interfaces danced across quantum probabilities, ensuring that every moment of communication remained balanced on the knife's edge of infinite potential. Dr. Konstantin Volkov's mathematical models had become something more than predictive tools. They were living bridges between civilizations, each equation a potential pathway of mutual understanding. Dr. Emir Hassan's consciousness mapped the psychological landscape of the negotiation, not as a traditional strategist, but as a cartographer of potential human-alien relationships. Every moment was a new territory, every interaction a possible future. The truly revolutionary moment came not from a grand speech or a technological demonstration, but from a simple gesture of recognition. Vexterra reached out, not with a physical appendage, but with a quantum communication field that was equal parts apology, curiosity, and genuine respect. The quantum collective was offering something they had never offered before: true dialogue. Maya Chen understood the profound nature of the moment. This wasn't about victory. This was about transformation. "We are not here to conquer," she communicated, the message spreading across multiple linguistic and conceptual dimensions. "We are here to expand the understanding of what's possible." The diplomatic breakthrough was multilayered. On one level, it was a negotiation between civilizations. On another, it was a fundamental reimagining of intelligence itself. The quantum collective was learning the most dangerous and beautiful lesson of all: that diversity of thought was not a weakness, but the most profound strength. Technological exchanges began to flow. But these were not simple transfers of knowledge. They were collaborative explorations. The humans shared not just technological innovations, but the process of innovation itself. The creative chaos that had driven human development became a gift more valuable than any weapon or scientific breakthrough. Dr. Hassan's psychological mapping revealed something extraordinary. The negotiation was healing not just interspecies relationships, but the internal psychological structures of the quantum collective itself. Individual thought was becoming a celebrated characteristic, not a threat to be eliminated. Lieutenant Kim's interfaces detected a fundamental shift in quantum communication protocols. The rigid, hierarchical communication systems of the alien civilizations were transforming into something more fluid, more adaptive. Dr. Volkov watched in fascination as mathematical models of civilization began to change. Predictive algorithms that had been stable for millennia started to develop branches, potentialities, individual paths. The paradigm shifter itself became a symbol of this transformation, no longer just a ship, but a living representation of the possibility of mutual understanding. Vexterra's final communication was a quantum masterpiece, part confession, part invitation, part pure potential. The quantum collective was offering humanity something unprecedented, true partnership. Maya Chen smiled. This was always the real mission. Not conquest, not demonstration of superiority, but expansion of collective understanding. As the diplomatic session concluded, the holographic representation of galactic civilizations shifted. What had once been a rigid map of territories became a living, breathing network of potential interactions. Lines of communication sprouted like neural networks, each connection a possibility, each intersection a potential future. Humanity had not conquered. They had transformed. And the universe would never be the same.